Thank you all for returning to the session. We will continue with a panel discussion too. International collaboration for encouraging innovation to support energy transitions in Asia.
Welcome back to the second panel for this forum. This time we're going to talk about innovation and the ways we can work together and collaborate to think about new technologies and new ideas to take us through this energy transition phase from brown to green. Now, we always talk about Asia as if it's one big region, but we all know that each country is very, very different, whether it be in terms of economic development or the availability or unavailability of natural resources, or maybe even just a historical preference for one option or the other. So when we take a look at the future, one person might say, look, hydrogen is the answer. Someone else might say, no, I think ammonia's got potential. And then someone else entirely new might come in and say, look, I've got this fantastic new technology that you've never seen before. So you are all experts in this field. I'm joined by 5 distinguished members today who are experts in their chosen field, who can tell us what they're hearing on the ground and what their own vision and strategy is for the future. So please welcome the 5 panelists for this forum today. Joining me here in Tokyo, Mr. Jun Nishizawa. He is the CEO of the Natural Gas Group and the Executive Vice President of Mitsubishi Corporation. Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
In person. And we really have the region covered, so let's go down under, all the way to Perth, Australia. I see Miss Meg O'Neill. She is the CEO of Woodside. Meg, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And let's hop over to Singapore and Mr. Wong Kim Yin. He is the president and CEO of Sembcorp. Welcome.
Thank you.
And let's skip over to the Philippines now and Shigeto Mizumoto from Chilenergy. I hope I'm saying that right. He is the chief strategy officer at that company. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight.
And then jump over to India and Mr. Arun Sharma of the Adani Group. He is the group head for sustainability and climate change.
Well, thank you very much. I am honored to be part of this panel.
Thank you all so much for joining me today. Mr. Nishizawa, since we're here together, I'd like to ask you first off the bat.
Okay.
Now, Mitsubishi Corporation has a long history in this region and also in this field. Looking ahead towards green technology and the energy transition, what do you think will be most appropriate in this transition phase?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for asking a big question. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Before answering the question, I would like to talk about the 2 peculiarities of Asia, which I think very important in considering Asian energy transition. The first one is that Asia still has serious environmental issues, such as air pollution. And the second peculiarity is that Asia requires enormous amount of energy for its economic growth. As for the first point, I would like to share with you the latest WHO report. I would like to quote, 1/3 of the global population, or 2.6 billion people worldwide, still remain without access to clean cooking. They still cook using solid fuels such as wood, crop waste, charcoal, coal, and dung. And what is worse, unfortunately, over 3.8 million of people continue to die prematurely every year from illness attributable to household air pollution, unquote. So to the best of my knowledge, approximately 60% of 2.6 billion people live in Asia. And I am sure everyone knows how many people passed away in COVID last year. The answer is 3.5 million. So now you can see how big this 3.8 million every year is. Well, as such, together with the GHG issue, the need for energy modernization is the urgent agenda for Asia. The second peculiarity is that Asia is a driving force of global economic growth. And to support it, a gigantic amount of new energy supply is needed. And that new energy has to be stable, affordable, and clean. And without such new energy supply, the growth of the global economy will be hindered, or it will be inevitable for most of Asian countries to go back to the more use of coal. Now, based on these peculiarities, I would like to share two answers to the question, what is the key things, key technology to accelerate the energy transition in Asia? My first answer is to reaffirm the role and the use of natural gas in energy transition and accelerate upstream investment in gas so that gas price is reasonably lowered throughout the transition period. I know many of you will say here, we are talking about key technologies for energy transition. We are not talking about hydrocarbon. But I would like to say, if you are really serious about smooth energy transition, we have to be more seriously consider how best to utilize natural gas in the transition period. Well, last October, in line with this idea, Mitsubishi Corporation announced our energy transformation EX strategy with our roadmap to carbon neutral society, in which we clearly stated, together with investments on the renewables and mineral resources for the electrification and the next generation energy such as ammonia and hydrogen, we will continue to invest on natural gas, which is essential for energy transition. But there are two technical reasons that we believe natural gas is so important, especially in Asia. The first reason is that renewable power plants technically need to tag with gas power plants in order to prepare for intermittency issues. This is particularly true in Asia because, as you know, in Asia, wind and solar conditions for renewable power are not as good as that of Europe. The second reason is heat demand. When we talk about energy and the greenhouse gas emissions, we tend to talk about electricity only. However, in reality, even in Europe, electricity occupies only 20% or so of the final energy consumption. And no matter how electrification progresses, it is technically very challenging to meet all heat energy demand with renewable power alone. For the avoidance of doubt, I don't deny the potential of renewable power and electrification in Asia particularly. But because of these two reasons, to balance stable energy supply for economic growth and GHG reductions in Asia, natural gas, which is much cleaner than other fossil fuel, is an efficient and realistic solution, at least for a decade or two from now. Now, let me talk about the second answer. I would like to insist that the key importance for energy transition in Asia is to best utilize the existing green technologies already developed. There are good technologies already having successfully completed R&D and pilot stage. But in order for those technologies to grow further as green social infrastructure, the significant amount of investments on the scale-up stage is required to accelerate cost reduction of the green products. As we have just announced our participation in the Breakthrough Energy Catalyst at this special ceremony today, it is our strong belief that both private and government sectors need to concentrate more on the scaling up projects of such green technologies. The BE, Breakthrough Energy Catalyst, I call it Catalyst. The Catalyst is a very innovative fund initiated by Mr. Bill Gates, focusing on the investments in the scale-up projects on primarily 4 clean technologies that have a potential to break through the status quo. They are long-duration energy storage and clean hydrogen and direct air capture, DAC, and e-fuel represented by SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. As everyone understands, the core technologies in these 4 areas have already been developed, but the investment on scale-up stage projects are not sufficient enough. And the Catalyst is going to focus on only the scale-up projects proposed from elsewhere, including Asia. So Mitsubishi Corporation participated in the Catalyst to contribute to lead Asian carbon neutralization by fully leveraging the knowledge and the network of the catalyst, along with our energy transformation EX strategy. Thank you very much.
Jun, thank you very much for your remarks. I think Shell Energy might beg to differ a little bit, especially on the point of wind power. So I want to bring Shigeto in at this point. Why did you decide to enter this field, and what is your product to offer that others don't, and how is it tailored to the needs of this region?
Hi, thank you, Kaori-san. So Shell Energy is a startup company founded in 2014 to achieve a mission for providing safe and reliable and affordable energy to all human beings through innovation of the wind energy. Our company name Shell Energy, is a combination of challenge and energy. It's standing for our desire to challenge limitation in energy generation, especially in the renewable energy sector. So wind power has a significant role to play in transition society towards carbon neutrality, and global wind production is growing 10% annually. However, areas prone to extreme weather events or unstable wind conditions, like Asian regions, have difficulties in utilizing their wind power potential because conventional wind turbines are single direction and maybe a damage in the storms and strong typhoon, strong wind. So Shell Energy invented the typhoon-proof Magnus wind turbine technologies, which is the turbine that survives extreme weather and generates energy throughout. So I'm saying that Asian region has a geographically and also climate challenges in that particularly. So the Magnus vertical axis wind turbine is a next generation wind turbine that doesn't use a propeller. But instead of the propeller, we use a cylinder creating a Magnus effect, so which is the same physical phenomenon behind the curve ball. By controlling the rotation of the cylinders corresponding to the wind speed, we can likewise control the Magnus force, which will then make the wind turbine spin along its main axis. So this enables us to maintain the stability of the turbine's rotation amid strong winds, in contrast to the propeller-type turbine that may be put at risk in similar conditions. So most conventional wind turbines use a propeller to generate power, which introduce difficulty in controlling the generation at high wind speed. Ours can continue generation power up to 144 kilometers per hour, the strength of the Category 1 typhoon, which is almost 1.5 times the conventional one that needs to stop even before severe weather turbulence become officially a typhoon or hurricanes. Beyond that, Magnus vertical axis wind turbine can withstand up to 340 kilometers per hour of a wind speed, which is that of the Category 5 typhoons. So additionally, our wind turbine creates less noise and pose almost no risk of collision with the birds. So we believe reaching transitions of energy forming in Asian region as to have a sustainable power where it is consumed. So this innovation paves the way for those who are not able to take advantage of renewable energy due to the risk of extreme weather conditions and environment concerns. Thanks. Thank you.
Amazing, Shigeto. I know you have a demo going on in the Philippines, so I do want to follow up on that later on in the panel. But first to you, Kim Yin. Semcor's reach is vast, but given your experience, what do you feel in ASEAN in particular? Which new technologies or what seems to be the best fit right now for this energy transition phase?
Thank you, Kaori-san. And I want to first start by thanking the METI for inviting me to this forum, this very distinguished event, and also among this very distinguished panel. Right, Semcorp we operate in the energy space, mainly power. We have about 15,000 megawatts is in operations. Of which 10,000 megawatts is in conventional gas and coal, and 5,000 megawatts is in renewables, wind and solar. Right, we operate in Southeast Asia, China, India, Middle East. We also have sizable operations in the UK. We operate one of the largest fleets of battery storage in the UK, 500 megawatts, including pipelines, right? So from our perspective, especially to your question, operating in Southeast Asia, We think in terms of transiting into a greener future, the brown to green transition, we need to recognize the things that are inherent in the market. To Mr. Nishizawa's point that he made earlier, the level of development across ASEAN is varied, right? You have a very developed market in Singapore. You have got Indonesia, Philippines, Myanmar, that is still many places that are struggling to get electricity supply, right? So that is one important factor to consider. The other that is very important to consider is also the fact that the resource, be it conventional resource or renewable resource, there is it's not evenly distributed clearly compared to the load centers, right? So the challenge really is getting the resource to the right people. And so that on the one hand is a challenge. On the other hand, as mentioned by Mr. Nishizawa as well, there's also the fact that renewables are intermittent. So what we are experiencing deploying these resources, renewable resource in Asia, which is the focus of Sembcorp this season, as we transit from brown to green, increasing our renewables portfolio while we transit out of our conventional portfolio. As we go through that, it's quite clear that we need to help, we need support from all the stakeholders, especially government and also multilaterals, to help the matching of this demand and supply, right? And matching the resource with the needs. And how to do that? So Mr. Nishizawa mentioned about gas. I agree with that. We need a transitional fuel because in the meantime, we saw that there are many, many coal plants that continue to be developed in places like Indonesia. You cannot deny them the desire and the rights they would claim, you know, to development and to cheap, reliable source of power. So if they have the alternative to a cleaner source, I'm sure they will latch on to it, right? But I think it is our job in having developed our own lifestyle to help them develop into a cleaner lifestyle. So how to do that? So natural gas is a natural way to go there. And then in the longer run, to transit into hydrogen, right? I think we will talk a lot more about hydrogen later, especially hearing from Ms. O'Neill. I'm sure she will touch on that. So the other thing that is more immediate in my mind, in terms of helping deal with the intermittency, as well as the matching of demand and supply, is actually transmission capacity, right? Transmission of electricity. We see that it is inadequate in many places, so much so that then it limits the deployment of renewables. You know, grids are beginning to say, look, you know, please don't build any more renewables because we cannot handle the intermittency, you know. So transmission as well as storage, if you ask me, those are areas that require some critical attention because the capital markets have been, rightfully so, very focused on deploying and supporting renewables capacity, but less attention is given to transmission and storage capacity. We operate in the UK, as I mentioned. So we already see in the UK, it has one of the highest proportion of renewable penetration into their grid. It's almost 50%. Most Asia countries, in terms of renewable penetration, is in the teens, you know, or 20s at best. So very soon, Asia countries, as we build up our renewables portfolio, we will hit a high enough level whereby the intermittency will become a serious problem, right? So in anticipation of that, building up transmission and battery storage capability, especially long duration battery that was mentioned just now by another panelist, those are very important areas where I think financing as well as policymakers should focus on, right? So a company like Sembcorp, coming back, we are very focused on transiting brown to green. We are very focused on deploying new investment into renewables in home ground, where we operate in Southeast Asia, China, India. Those are areas in which we think it is beyond Sembcorp's own capability when it comes to transmission. We are focusing on helping deploy batteries where it makes sense. That would be, in my mind, one of the most important and even nearer term compared to hydrogen. I want to talk a little bit also about hydrogen. Sembcorp today is the largest importer of natural gas into Singapore through pipeline as well as through LNG, right? A place like Singapore, even though we may have we may start to import green electrons and green molecules into Singapore, but in the long run, we would still have to be self-sufficient, right? Then from that perspective, the only viable or prospective substitute, a greener substitute for natural gas into Singapore would have to be hydrogen, right? So from that perspective, we are working very hard to position ourselves to learn about hydrogen technology. And we're very encouraged to see that Japan, right, in particular, has invested a lot into the research. A few years ago, I was in Japan before COVID. They already have, if you ask me, figure out the technology. The only question is cost and scale, right? So we are working with Mitsubishi and Toyota, for instance, to pilot bringing in green hydrogen molecules into Singapore through one of their technologies called Spira. We are hoping that working together with like-minded partners like Mitsubishi, like Australia, where you are abundant of resource, then Singapore could benefit from this, and then Sembcorp could continue to be a primary, one of the largest producers or suppliers of green energy into Singapore, right? So I should stop there, but just a sense of where Sembcorp is and how we see ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you. All great ideas, of course, and cost, of course, and scaling up in new technology is always an issue when we're talking about nascent technologies. But I do want to bring in Meg. From Woodside's perspective, when you take a look short-term and also long-term, what do you think makes sense for you as a company in this transition phase?
Thank you, Kerry-san. And I'd like to start by thanking both METI and the Australian government for inviting Woodside to contribute to this very important conversation. As I think about the new energy challenge, I think it's worth reflecting a bit on our past and the journey that we've been on. And Woodside has been an LNG producer for just over 30 years. And if I think back about how the LNG business got started and how we began our journey as a company, it was through partnerships. In the 1980s, LNG was just evolving as an energy source. And Woodside was in a position where we needed to find the right partners, and we found a number of partners, many of whom were in the Japanese industrial segment. And we're very pleased to have had Mitsubishi and Mitsui be partners with us in investing in the Northwest Shelf. But it was a very critical investment decision by many Japanese utilities as well to agree to take the product that we were producing. And we're very proud of the fact that we've been delivering safe, reliable, and affordable LNG to Japan for over 30 years. Now, of course, as time has gone by, we've expanded our markets. The LNG industry has grown tremendously over the last period. And I see a very similar pathway evolving as we think about new energy products such as hydrogen and ammonia. So when we think about climate change, from a Woodside perspective, we have two commitments. First off is our commitment to reduce emissions in our own business. And we've set ourselves near, medium, and long-term emissions reduction targets on a pathway towards net zero by 2050. And we think that's a pathway that all governments, companies, and individuals as society need to make if we're to be successful in limiting global warming. The second part of our climate strategy is to offer our customers the products, the lower carbon products and services that will help them meet their energy needs, but in a way that has lower carbon intensity than what they've used in the past. Now, we still think gas is a very important part of the mix for the reasons that Nishizawa-san mentioned in his opening remarks. But we do think there is a role for products like hydrogen and ammonia to play, and that's why Woodside's made an announcement that we are targeting spending $5 billion on these kinds of products and services between now and 2030 to help our customers on their decarbonization journey. But this is a journey that we can't make by ourselves. We could go off, of course, and build a hydrogen plant today, but if there's not the value chain, if there's not a customer who's ready to take the product, it'd be money that would be ill spent. And so innovation and partnership really are essential on this decarbonization journey. And I think it'll be very similar to what we saw in the LNG space, that we'll need to be working with customers. And we have some great relationships in Japan as well as in Singapore with customers who are also committed to the decarbonization journey on building out the supply chain, understanding the technology, understanding where investment needs to be made to modernize power plants, be they coal-fired or gas-fired at the customer's end, or to build out the infrastructure that would be needed to use a product such as liquid hydrogen. So I think these kinds of collaborations are essential to unlock the innovation and to build out the opportunity to invest at scale.
Thank you so much, Meg. Arun, I want to ask you, coal is feeding predominantly the demand in developing economies. Realistically, what can be done to transition away from coal in developing economies?
Well, thank you. I think this is the defining question of the time. As different regions of the world try to improve the quality of life of their citizens, and at the same time, we address the problem of climate change. I think it is important to understand that the solutions and the approaches are going to be different for different countries. And the context is fairly important. To give you a bit more context on where I'm coming from, I'm the group head for sustainability and climate change for Adani Group. It is the largest private sector player in India in terms of energy and infrastructure. It has almost 28 to 30% of India's port capacity, 25% of India's airport capacity, the largest thermal power generator in the private sector, and also the largest renewable energy company. So it does provide us with a perspective on how to balance much needed growth for India and at the same time do it in a way that we address the challenges facing the globe in terms of climate change. And I think that is the perspective that we bring, and that will also explain some of the directions that we are taking. Now, if we come to Asia, the situation in Asia is very different, say, from the United States or from Europe or from the Middle East. Some countries in Asia, and if I include Australia and New Zealand, they're endowed with different kinds of energy, including significant amount of LNG and renewable resources. Then there are some countries that have natural gas as a source, like Malaysia and Brunei, but there are some countries that do not have a abundant supply of natural gas. And as such, natural gas for power generation has been a challenge for countries that cannot lock in landed LNG prices at a reasonable level. So for power generation, it does not make sense for some of these countries, but natural gas is a very valuable industrial feedstock for chemicals, and whatever these countries can get needs to be used for those. But there are some countries like Japan and Korea that are well off, and they can have a multifaceted approach. So one thing to understand is that for a country like India, and that may be true for some other countries, coal is a reality for the next 2 decades for baseload power, because landed LNG is too expensive, the foreign exchange reserves are limited, and any new capital expenditure will stay on to the second half of the century. So the approach that companies in India have to take, and this is what Adani Group is doing, is that let us make our thermal power plants as emission efficient as possible, but at the same time, invest in renewable energy and storage technologies like green hydrogen. And I'll come to that. So what we are doing for our thermal power fleet is investing in technologies like supercritical and ultracritical so that they are able to reduce the emissions per unit of energy generated. We are trying to source good quality coal that for the same unit of power, they actually have lower emission. But then to start looking at technologies that can further reduce the emission intensity of our thermal power plants. So obviously, we're looking at biomass blending. And we have to realize that biomass blending can also have limits because land becomes a limit, how much biomass we can generate. But that is definitely a lever that we are experimenting with. But the important point is that we can apply all these techniques, but we also have to ultimately invest in new technological trends that are going to figure out, that are going to provide us with a way for the transition that the world needs and India needs. So another thing that we are doing with our Japanese, partners, and I want to acknowledge the long collaboration that the Adani Group has over a decade with COA that have gone with many of the journeys that we have gone together in a number of sectors. And we obviously are looking at them in also assisting us with partnerships in the renewable energy transformation. So we recently signed an MOU with IHI and COA to start learning from Japan on how we blend 20% liquid ammonia in thermal power plants. And that we believe will significantly reduce the emission intensity of our thermal power plants. And that is another example we are doing. We are now exploring carbon capture and looking at how to use some of that carbon capture either in building materials or also in creating green chemicals in the future. But all this depends on addressing the need to store energy from renewables to address their intermittency. So what the group is doing is, while we are making our thermal fleet as low as possible, as low emission intensity as possible, but we are investing in renewables and we are investing in green hydrogen. We believe that given our scale in renewables, we are well positioned to crack the green hydrogen cost structure. And we also believe that green hydrogen for India makes significant sense because India has done a great job in scaling up renewables. It does not have affordable natural gas, and it doesn't have many other baseload power sources. So the regulatory dimension in India for green hydrogen will be significantly high. And if we believe that the price of green hydrogen comes down to less than $1 a kilogram, say 80 cents, then with combined cycle gas turbines, hydrogen turbines, and utility scale fuel cells, somewhere towards 2040s, we will have a path away for baseload power, which will be based on green hydrogen. So our strategy is very simple. Make the thermal power fleet as emission efficient as possible, invest in green hydrogen and the value chain to bring the cost down. And when the cost comes to 80 cents, we have a pathway. But before we are able to bring the cost down, we cannot mortgage the country's future by figuring out a way to get out of coal. And I think this is a challenge that many other countries in Asia will be facing. And we believe that this is a just solution, responsible, but at the same time, addressing the need for affordable energy for vast majority of Indians who still have scarce access to it.
Shigeto, I'd like to turn to you. When I think wind, I think Denmark, I think the Netherlands, and this kind of ties into Kim Yin's comment about cost. You have a demo up and running in the Philippines right now. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've learned from that demo and what you can do to bring down costs so that you can make this a viable option for everybody?
Thanks for the questions. So I'm just a little bit explain about our demo in the Philippines. Now we are focusing on the market in Asian Pacific region, especially in the Philippines. The country has frequent typhoons every year and suffered greatly from the calamities caused by strong wind and rainfall. So we started our first demonstrations in the Philippines in the northern island of the country called Batanes. So Batanes Island they always rely on their diesel generators for energy supply. Aside from being costly, fuel supply could be easily affected by adverse weather and marine conditions. The delayed fuel shipment could also mean rotating a total power outage in the island. So our technology is kind of bringing renewable energy to the island, the first installation of renewable energy in the island. Then also bring down the dependency of the fossil fuels by brought it outside of the island. So it means that we are reducing the energy cost in the island because the cost of the diesel plus the shipment fee from the mainland is quite costly than just renewable energy. So our turbines is more significantly reducing the prices of energy in the island. But of course, that the other panelists mentioned, renewable energy should come with a storage if renewable energy penetration rate is greater than 20 or 30%. So that of course that the single technology cannot only bring down the cost of the entire energy, but we need to combine with other technology such as storage of batteries or maybe the hydrogen in the future. That we kind of need to have a combination that not only the single technology cannot bring down the cost entire energy generation.
Shigeto, if I may ask, I mean, business model-wise, how much does one tower cost for a customer for Challenge Energy, and how much lower is that than a traditional option?
Our turbine is now a 10 kilowatt model, so it's kind of small turbines. Then the cost is around $200,000 US dollars right now. So it's roughly calculating that compared to the existing diesel cost, like we can bring down the cost like 10 to 20% down to the cost. So that's our solutions. Also, of course, depending on the wind conditions, but that rough calculation from the demo, what we did in the island.
Very interesting. Meg, price point, production cost, always critical for any company. But in that sense, is ammonia a viable option for Woodside?
So we think so. As I said, we've been working in a number of different partnerships, some with key Japanese partners to understand what the value chain would look like. And that really is the key question that our customers have. And if we think about it from the customer's perspective, they need to they need confidence that their energy will be secure. And I think the conflict in Russia and Ukraine has really re-emphasized the importance of energy security. They want energy that is safe. They want energy that is reliable and available 24 hours a day, and they want energy that's affordable. So a lot of the work that we've been doing on the ammonia front has been to understand what it would take to scale up to an industrial size value chain, to be delivering ammonia at scale, be it 500,000 tons per year or 1 million tons per year, and understand what does that look like from the customer's perspective. And I think there's been a lot of kind of debate or discussion in the marketplace around, the color label tagged to various products. One of the things that we think is really important is to keep all options available. Because as individual customers think about the different parameters, they're going to make different decisions. There'll be customers who will say, I really want a green product and I will pay more for a green product. And so there'll be customers that we can work on partnerships in that space. But there'll be some customers who will be more price sensitive, who will say, look, I want a product that has no emissions when I consume it, But I'm willing to have a blue solution, solution where, for example, as a producer, we would use CCS or CCUS to offset the emissions, to help keep the price down for the customers. And so that's all the calculus that's going on right now. And if you look at some of the projects we've announced, we're looking at an ammonia opportunity in Tasmania, where we would be able to access surplus hydropower. That's a space where we could offer a green product. We're also looking at a plant proposed in Perth, very close to Perth, where we would initially propose starting with a blue solution, so using gas as the feedstock. And again, it really goes to addressing what the customer's preference is, and we're seeing different customers have different price points. And I think that's a bit of how this journey is going to play out, but we think it's important to keep all options on the table because the decarbonization challenge really is a huge one, and I think it'd be premature to be ruling anything out at this stage.
Yep, and you hit the nail on the head with the energy security created by the war in Ukraine. And definitely that is the big question all of us are pondering at this time. Jun, I do want to bring you back into this conversation. When you have new innovation, you need to level the playing field, so to speak. And if you have public sector support behind some of these new initiatives in terms of incentives and so forth, it gives a nudge to nascent technologies when they need it most. Is that your thinking as well for Mitsubishi Corporation?
Well, certainly the public sector's support is very, very important. I say it's very crucial to realize the carbon neutral society. And particularly, I would like to say two things. One is the government role. As government role, government needs to make clear what the technologies that they are going to support. Of course, Meg-san said that we need to keep all options. That's right. But at the same time, when it comes to scale up stage, it is, I think, important, for the government to guide, the private investors as to which way government is going to navigate or guide all the investors from private sectors. Otherwise, the private sectors cannot have enough confidence, to go that way or this way. And they also have to get, the support, from shareholders. So to show the clear guidance, the which way government is going to guide, the energy transition, that's very important point. And I talked a bit about our participation in the Breakthrough Energy Catalyst. And in case of the Breakthrough Energy Catalyst, actually, the 4 areas of the technologies Catalyst is going to invest, that is in line with the Department of Energy of the United States, the guideline. So that is one thing. The second thing I would like to say is the government needs to provide financial support. And hopefully, I think the effective way of the financial support is in the form of the loan guarantee. Okay, and this is very important in order to encourage the commercial loan facilities from the private sectors. And this is very important in case of, again, the Breakthrough Energy Catalyst. Department of Energy is kind of committed. They actually promised to provide up to $20 billion of the loan of the financial support, primarily in the form of the loan guarantee. I think this is the 2 major functions I can pick up now.
Yep. Thank you so much. Kim Bien, what new technologies look promising to you? And I was going to ask from the brown to green transition, but Meg has reminded me there are all sorts of different colors in the spectrum.
Yes, we are very focused on renewables, right? So I must first say that when you ask me this question, my lens is, with regard to the dimensions of my business. So in the renewable space, you can see that over the last 10, 15 years, right, solar and wind has gained prominence because the cost has come down. Now, even as we are speaking, we know of, and we sometimes invest in some of this early stage technology, whereby we have solar panels that no longer require silicon, right? So I know of some, technology like this. You just need to spray the material, on the surface. And the cost of which is lower than that of the conventional PV, right? So these are the type of technologies that will enable us to leapfrog because the resource doesn't change. It's still the sunlight, right? So how do we better harness the sunlight? So that's one area. I mentioned about storage just now. I think that is very important to deal with intermittency, to deal with time shifting, right? In places like Philippines where there are islands, in Indonesia where there are thousands of islands, it doesn't make sense to build transmission all over the place, right? So, but then if you have got storage, and you can see that short duration storage, long duration storage, they're all coming along, and different type of storage technology fits different requirements, right? Lithium ion might be very good for a certain application, but for longer duration type, and where you have the luxury of space, you might want to use a very different technology than lithium ion, right? So storage is another area. I talked about transmission just now. Until I think 10, 15 years ago, even until 10 years ago, we do not see long distance direct current high voltage, right? If you do not have that, then the condition to move electrons far away and connect, again, a resource to a load center is not available, right? So that is, in my mind, a very big game changer. And I think to some extent, because of scale, China has pioneered some of this. They are leader in that technology today, which I think the rest of the world can benefit from, right? So that's one. And then we can move electrons. We can also move molecules, right? So what Japan and Australia is doing, investing into the hydrogen value chain, moving it, whether in the form of ammonia, liquid hydrogen, MCH. These are all options that are out there. We are beginning to see more and more investment going into hydrogen in terms of the value chain. I can tell you, until last year, when I'm sitting on a panel like this, that is more Americas or Europe-centric, for some reason, if there are no Japanese on the panel, the attention to hydrogen is actually much less. I don't know whether it's the same observation other panelists, right? So I, because of my personal exposure to the Japanese innovations and the developments, so I would then become, in the absence of a Japanese representative, I will become the advocate of hydrogen in that panel. But in the last 6 months or 12 months, suddenly the attention to hydrogen has grown. So I want to, I know that this is not maybe not the most mind-boggling or ideas that have come along, but really hydrogen has the potential, to really move this energy transition, right? So those are the technologies that in my mind are very promising. I want to also add one more element to this, and that is carbon pricing. So if we're able to find a way to trace and price carbon properly, right, and have a more transparent marketplace for carbon pricing, then it would also be tremendous so-called pull factor in bringing everybody along, in bringing every market along. So I know of technology that is able to put a signature to a certain product, for instance, a plastic product, and then through that signature, you're able to trace from source to the end. And then because of that, you are able to attribute the carbon footprint of this product, right? So when this type of technology becomes prevalent, becomes cheap, or at least commercially viable, then I think that will also be another important factor in the energy transition from brown to green.
Yeah, it encourages transparency, of course. You mentioned the storage issue, which of course is critical, and I want to ask Shigeto this because you mentioned the fact that space is a premium, and Chell Energy is effectively addressing that with your product, or trying to address with your product. How does your product overcome this storage challenge? Because electricity is a waste if we can't store it anywhere. And particularly in the area where you're operating, how does it narrow the wealth gap, so to speak?
Thank you for the question. So we are trying to do as a combination of the other technology like solar and wind, because sometimes like solar, the solars and wind, we can do the time shift of the generation of the power, the time of power generations. So that what we are trying to do in the remote island in the Philippines, like we are trying to introduce the microgrid, which combined with solar and wind and also the storage technology to maximize the use of renewable energy in those small grid or small islands. But in terms of the specialties or futures of renewable energy, that it generates when it consumes, so that we can use the renewable energy from where it is generated by those natural resources. So it's more natural to us, like as Kim once said, that it's not the practical way to connect all the island by transmission line. So that our visions or our mission is to generate the power when it's consumed a lot. So that's our strategies to overcome those are intermittency of the renewable energy. So it is more on like technology, how we use those renewable energy when it is generated. Then also how we storage those energy in the proper way. Like for example, in island, there is a lot of use of electricity. Like you can just pump out the water when the electricity is enough for cover up all the island. So we can do, those are the combinations, not only energy, power, but also we can combine with like agriculture or like water supplies, and also other usage that we can maximize, and also we can integrate all the part of the energy consumed in the island. Then we think that we can do it in a small scale in the first place. So those islands must be the innovation hub, we can call it. Like we can do in a small scale in the first place, then we can do it in a bigger version or scaling up. Those are like smart city or smart communities kind of approach in the bigger scale in the future.
Yeah. Arun, I want to follow up a little bit. It's a similar question about the wealth gap issue. How do we go green or decarbonize and also narrow this wealth gap at the same time? Because both of these issues are critical, particularly for the Asian region.
This is a very challenging question. This is a very challenging question from the perspective of how we make energy cost efficient for the vast majority of our populations, and at the same time, how we reduce the emission footprint of our energy and our large-scale infrastructure. And I think, let me take this question in a couple of different ways. Of course, green hydrogen is one opportunity because the renewable energy costs are coming down, but still the electrolyzer costs are significant. And so there is a need for the developed economies to assist developing countries by providing some of that capital expenditure subsidy as part of the funding that they had promised. So rather than building more thermal power plants, they actually are encouraged to look at green hydrogen as a possibility in the future. And I think this is how the developed countries can target the development of a green hydrogen economy that actually can address the affordability of the energy equation in developing countries. But as you said about equity, and as you said about where we can sort of make sure that this growth is equitable, comes down to how different countries look at their growth. If you take the example of India, India is a vast country where significant majority of its population still lives in rural areas. It's a country that has significant agricultural sector, and it produces a lot of biomass that is used in certain ways. It's monetized as a fuel or as for some other purposes in cogeneration plants. Now, biomass does provide another mechanism by which the growth can be equitable. I think the big challenge in a country like India is how do we figure out that the growth in rural India is at par or doesn't fall too far behind the growth in urban India. Of course, there will be urbanization, but how the whole country as a whole benefits from this transition is a challenge for all countries. Now, if you look at biomass, of course, we try to look at biomass and we say we produce bioethanol, and that makes a lot of sense. But bioethanol is just another commodity. It's like, it doesn't give a very high value add to what the biomass producers are going to get. But we also know that technologically now it is feasible to convert biomass or use biomass as a feedstock for high value added chemicals. So some countries in Latin America, in South America, pilots have been taking place in Australia. And if we look at places like sugar mills or places where large concentration of biomass is generated, and if we are able to attach a biorefinery to produce high value added chemicals, then we create rural jobs that are in the manufacturing sector, which has been a challenge for many countries. Now, it makes economic sense for these jobs or this manufacturing to take place in rural areas, because the moment you try to take biomass and ship it to an urban center, economically it becomes unviable because the density of biomass is very light. So it does make sense. So I think what the policymakers in Asia have to look at, and I'm sure, countries like Malaysia are already, heading in this direction, is create the policy levers where the biomass can be considered as a feedstock for high value added chemicals. And it makes economic sense to manufacture them where the biomass is produced. And how the developed countries can help? Well, Japan can say that 10% of all our chemicals actually have to come from biomass, okay? And suddenly you have created a market signal which will lead to final investment decision for these manufacturing plants. And that's one way where we feel that the economic growth and development of the rural and urban parts of developing economies try to not get too far away from each other. And that is perhaps worth looking at.
Thank you for that, Arun. Jun, what do you see as game changer technology?
Well, big question, actually. I don't talk about cold fusion, but there are many technologies that can be a game changer, or that has the big game-changing potential. But I think important thing is, as a few the people, Mizumoto-san repeatedly mentioned, combination of technology, that is really important. And a good example is I think battery how to store the energy, how to store the power. That's really the key. But let me explain this way, sorry. Breakthrough energy catalyst to pick up 4 technologies. And why these 4 technologies were picked up, there is a reason. Number one, the investment on the long duration energy storage represented by, let's say, long duration battery, that makes the price, cost of the renewable power much lower. And then with the lowered, the renewable power price, and that could actually lower the direct air capture's cost. And also that could also lower the cost of the making green hydrogen. And the low price of the green hydrogen, the low price of the CO2 captured from the air, that could actually lead the manufacturing of the e-fuel represented by the sustainable aviation fuel. This way, the technology has to be combined in order to become the game changer. I think, I'm not sure I'm answering your question or not, but
You are, absolutely. Thank you so much. Meg, it's pretty common when you look at nascent technology that companies would want to partner with someone else because one, it saves on R&D, there's synergy to be had and so forth. In that sense, would it make sense for Woodside to partner in Japan?
We have a number of fantastic partnerships, actually. When we think about developing an energy value chain for something that's going to be used in a very new way, we absolutely need to have those partnerships. There's work that we're doing to understand how do we produce products like ammonia or liquid hydrogen? How do we do that in a cost-efficient way? How do we integrate the green power to be able to underpin that production? But obviously we have to have partners on the customer end who are going to be looking at things like with their existing coal-fired power stations, how do they get ammonia into those plants? How much ammonia can they co-fire with coal? In existing gas plants, how much hydrogen can be co-fired? There's technology development that's required. So things like turbines, changing the design of a turbine to allow it to fire some sort of blend of gas and hydrogen. And so there's a number of partners that we work with, big and small, both at the sort of big customer end as well as the developer of individual kind of bits of technology. I think one partnership I might want to spotlight is a partnership that we have with a company called Heliogen, which is a US company that's looking at concentrated solar thermal. And they've integrated AI in this CST technology, which has been around for a while, but hasn't been cost competitive. But we think that this partnership is one that may have cracked the nut on how to do it in a really cost-effective way. So it's a fairly small company, but we're involved as a partner, and the US Department of Energy is involved as well. And, we see that as potentially another building block to our hydrogen aspirations. If we can get 24/7 solar energy to feed our future ammonia or hydrogen plants, well, that's just brought that acceleration of green forward in time. So I think a number of partnerships are going to be required, and it's going to be with big companies, medium-sized companies, and small companies as we all work through the challenges.
Sounds great. Arun, the Adani Group has a war chest for renewables, and some say this might lead to consolidation in the sector. Are they right?
I think to look at this question, one has to look at the scale of what India needs. Prime Minister Modi did say that, India will produce 500 gigawatt of renewable capacity by 2030. Even with, Adani Group's own estimates, yes, we want to be the largest renewable energy company in the world because we believe that is what is needed for India. We have the execution ability, but, even we, will not be more than 10, 12%, on current projections. We may be bigger, we may be smaller. It all depends on the investment that we are able to bring. India's needs are so huge that it will require every Indian company in the renewable space to scale up and to be a big global player in terms of global size, so that India can meet its target and for once and for all, remove the dependence on energy imports that have been a yoke around its entire growth. And so I do not believe that there is a issue of concentration. It is an issue of a competitive environment where many large players, great Indian conglomerates, who will contribute to the renewable growth, and Adani will be a part, and of course, will be a very competitive part of this equation. But what India needs is significantly more than what any company, no matter what their scale is, will be able to do.
Shigeto, the economic recovery post-COVID is looking pretty patchy. Has that impacted your business, and what kind of policies would you like to see to encourage healthy competition?
Thanks for the questions. So that we are mostly like, our startup that we are doing a lot of investment in our innovation and technical development. Then of course there is a difficulties in getting the fund or investment from the investors all over the world after the during and after the COVID, because they're mostly invest in, they're shrinking their investment in those in general terms. But of course, that in this energy transition, seeking an energy transition, also then aiming to decarbonize society, we need to have a lot of investment in the technology not exist at today. So we are now trying to upscaling our wind turbine up to 100 kilowatt and 1 megawatt in 2025 and 2030. So we are more on need an investment in the developing our technology and also bring down the cost of the technology itself to generate more affordable electricity to all human beings. Then, of course, that as you mentioned earlier, that the private public support in those technological development is kind of important to scaling up the technology in our side. Then, of course, that in Japanese government, like including METI and also the NEDO, the research and agencies are doing a great work to have those technology to be realized or installed in the society in real life. But I also want to mention that the private sector, like Japanese big corporation, like from Nishizawa-san, has more steps in the investment in those technologies. Like we really need to have more source of funding that we can, stably, and also we are doing the large scale development to really achieve the net zero by 2050. Thank you.
Now, the elephant in the room, of course, is Ukraine, and the human toll, of course, first and foremost in our minds. And we, of course, want a peaceful resolution as quickly as possible. But it has also brought to the forefront of everyone's mind the question of energy security. So, Meg, has it impacted you? Well, of course, it's impacted you. It's impacted all of us. But how are you adjusting to this new reality at Woodside?
Yeah, I think the situation, well, the war in Ukraine has really re-spotlighted the importance of energy security and how energy security directly underpins economic security, which is intimately linked with national security. I think the world has had a bit of a wake-up call that where you get your energy from is very important. And so when we look at the business that we operate here, where we produce LNG from a stable democratic country like Australia, I think the war in Ukraine is as much a reminder that we have opportunity here. We have gas fields that are yet undeveloped. We took an investment decision late last year to progress the Scarborough field, which is a very significant dry gas field, very low CO2. We recognize that's going to be a very important part of the energy mix in the late half of the 2020s and 2030s, but there's other undeveloped gas resources here in Australia. And I think the situation in Ukraine has been a reminder to the world that, perhaps we need to very much focus on where energy comes from. And I think it does create opportunities for us in Australia. Obviously, there's a number of challenges, and our hearts go out to the people of Ukraine who are fighting valiantly to protect their country. But I do think that this will result in a bit of a reset of the global energy landscape where consumers of energy are going to be thinking very hard about where they get that energy from.
Absolutely. I mean, as a consumer, I can say you're absolutely right on that point. Jun, I'm going to give you the final word, joining me here in Tokyo. I think of the car and how we went from gasoline to hybrid to fuel cells and now full electrification. And throughout that process, as a consumer, you needed incentives to adopt, and the government outlined some policies to encourage that change. Is that public-private sector approach really what's critical in energy transition?
Well, thank you. It's, of course, the answer is yes. And the public and the private sector's cooperation is really, really important. But the question is how much, the subsidy government has to bear, and is it sustainable or not? That's really the big question. And just now, Meg-san, and you talked about, the Ukraine issue. And energy, the prices, it's not really directly caused by the Ukraine issue. But anyway, the gas crisis in Europe happened, since last October or so. And that's certainly because the many reasons, actually, too hasty shift to the renewables, or the too less, the investment on the upstream of oil and gas. And those are the causing the, the energy crisis. And for the transition period, in order to get to the carbon neutral 2050 or 50 or even earlier, we have to actually soft land. In order to do so, we have to really make much of the, the energy options and the investment on the current, the energy sources. Sorry, I'm not probably answering your questions directly, but, the private and government sectors cooperation is really is essential, and both sides have to cooperate with each other.
Thank you so much. It has been an honor to join you all today to discuss one of the most pressing agendas of our time. Thank you very much to our panelists and our participants, Mr. Wong Kim Kim from SEBCorp, Ms. Meg O'Neill from Woodside, Mr. Shigeto Mizumoto from Chalenergy, Mr. Arun Sharma from the Adani Group, and of course, Mr. Jun Nishizawa from Mitsubishi Corporation. Thank you, and see you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you again to all panelists who have taken time to attend the panel discussion. We are coming to the end of today's program. The closing remarks will be held by Mr. Ryo Minami, Deputy Commissioner for International Affairs and Director General for International Policy on Carbon Neutrality, Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, Japan.
各国閣僚および参加者の皆様。
Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am Ryo Minami, Director General for Policy Planning and Coordination, Agency for Natural Resources and Energy. Thank you very much for participating in today's AGTPM Public-Private Forum. Today's sessions provided a number of important insights for accelerating diverse and realistic energy transitions in Asia. First of all, importance of Japan's three principles. Number 1, efforts along diverse paths. 2, innovation. 3, engagement. In particular, Asian countries are expected to continue to expand their energy demand in line with economic growth. And innovation, which is the theme of this public-private forum, is expected to be indispensable for the promotion of carbon neutrality. And the second is mobilizing large-scale financing. Today, 10 MOUs were signed for new initiatives in renewable energy, hydrogen, ammonia, CCS, and other areas. And finance is essential for these projects to move forward in each country. From this perspective, it is important to establish rules to support transitions in terms of finance, as the study group of private financial institutions announced today. Third is cross-border collaboration between industry, academia, and government. Innovation and finance are important, but it is not easy to achieve them by one country alone. By bringing together the wisdom and cooperation of countries and sectors in Asia and the Middle East towards the same goal of carbon neutrality, a powerful power can be generated. Japan will continue to steadily support such efforts in Asia under the Asian Energy Transition Initiative, or AT. In order to achieve carbon neutrality and green growth not only in Asia but throughout the world, Japan is promoting various initiatives both in Japan and outside of Japan. As part of these efforts, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry will hold an international conference related to energy and environment as part of Tokyo Beyond Zero Week 2022 in the fall of this year. This year, we will continue to invite ministers, leaders in various fields, and experts from around the world to hold extensive discussions on Beyond Zero and individual challenges towards its realization, as well as paths and methods to realize them, and to present a realistic and concrete picture to the world towards the realization of virtuous cycle of economy and environment. The HEGPM is also planning to hold its second meeting on the occasion of the Tokyo Beyond Zero Week, and we sincerely look forward to your participation. And finally, I would like to thank you once again for participating in today's HEGPM Public-Private Forum. We look forward to discussing with you on various occasions in the future to accelerate green growth and energy transition in Asia, as well as to moving forward with various initiatives together. I look forward to welcoming you all to Tokyo at the second HEGPM in September, and I will now conclude my closing remarks. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minami. This concludes the first Asia Green Growth Partnership Ministerial Meeting Public-Private Forum. Thank you very much for your participation. A questionnaire will be sent to your registered email address soon, and it would be appreciated if you could take to answer the questionnaire for future references. Please click the button on the top right corner of your screen to log out from Events Air. Thank you again for joining, and we wish you have a good evening or a good day.